The arrival. The salty spray of the alien ocean stung Captain Jack Steele's eyes as he stood on the rocky shore, surveying the strange new world before him. His sleek starship, the ISS Odyssey, perched on a nearby cliff, its silver hull gleaming under the twin suns' light. The crew had come to this uncharted planet seeking new allies in their ongoing war against the ruthless Chrono Empire. But instead of fearsome warriors, they had found a primitive village inhabited solely by humanoid females. "Well, ain't this a kick in the head?" Jack muttered, running a hand through his close-cropped blonde hair. "Command's not gonna like this one bit." Sergeant Riker, his burly second-in-command, grunted in agreement. "A bunch of dames in grass skirts ain't what I expected either, Cap. What now?" Jack sighed, his gaze following a group of the alien women approaching from the village. They were tall, with shimmering blue skin and long flowing hair in shades of purple and green. Most wore simple woven garments that left little to the imagination. "Guess we better go say hello. Remember, we're here as representatives of Earth. Best behavior, Riker." Riker snorted. "No promises, sir. Ain't every day you get to chat up space babes." The alien women approached, led by one adorned with a feathered headdress and beaded necklace. She stopped a few paces away, cocking her head as she studied the human men. "I am Ta, High Priestess of the Urella tribe," she said in accented but clear English. "What brings you, sky travelers, to our shores?" Jack stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Captain Jack Steele of the Earth ship Odyssey. We come in peace, seeking friendship between our peoples." Ta's violet eyes sparkled with amusement. "Friendship, you say? We Urella have a special ritual for greeting honored guests." She turned to her companions. "Sisters, let us greet them properly." To Jack's shock, the females reached down and lifted their skirts, fully exposing their lower halves. His jaw dropped as he took in the sight of a dozen azure-skinned women standing bare. Beside him, Riker made a strangled, choking sound. Tal grinned at their stunned expressions. "Does this gesture of openness please you, Captain? Among the Urella, bearing one's nethers is a sign of utmost trust and hospitality." Jack quickly composed himself, though his face burned red. It's a bit different from what we're used to, but we appreciate the warm welcome. Maybe we could discuss matters further in a more clothed setting." The priestess laughed, a musical sound, as she and the others lowered their skirts. "But of course, come, let me show you our village. We have much to discuss." As they followed Ta into the heart of the village, Jack couldn't help but marvel at the strange yet beautiful architecture around him. The Urella dwellings seemed to grow naturally from the lush vegetation, with walls woven from living vines and roofs thatched with vibrant flowers. The entire village felt like a psychedelic wonderland. Everywhere he looked, more blue-skinned women went about their tasks, tending to gardens, weaving tapestries, or practicing dances. Many of them greeted the human visitors with that same scandalous skirt-lifting ritual. "Goddamn," Riker muttered under his breath. "It's like a horny sci-fi nerd's dream come to life." "Keep it in your pants, Sergeant," Jack growled. "We're on a diplomatic mission, not a frat party." Still, Jack found it increasingly difficult to ignore the allure of the alien women. There was something intoxicating about their presence, a sensuality that threatened to overwhelm his better judgment. Tal glanced back at him with a knowing smirk, as if sensing his inner turmoil. "You seem troubled, Captain. Does our way of life not appeal to you?" Jack cleared his throat awkwardly. "It's very appealing, just a lot to take in at once. Our cultures are quite different. Perhaps, but are we not all the same in the ways that truly matter? A desire for connection, for joy, for the pleasures of the flesh." She ran a finger down his chest suggestively. Jack captured her hand, ignoring the electric tingle her touch ignited. "Look, Your Holiness, your hotness. I'm flattered, but we need to focus on the bigger picture here, the threat of the Chronos." Ta waved dismissively. "Always so serious, you humans. You must learn to live in the moment. She led them into the largest structure in the village, a towering cathedral of twisted branches and luminous petals. Inside, plush cushions were scattered across the mossy floor, and the air was thick with the heady scent of alien incense. Dozens of Urella women reclined inside. "Welcome to the Temple of Saba, sacred space of our goddess of love," Ta said, draping herself across a pile of cushions. Her skirt rode up, revealing more cobalt skin. "Here, we explore the heights of pleasure and the depths of passion. Perhaps you would care for a demonstration." Riker started choking again, and Jack felt his mouth go dry. He managed a nervous laugh. "I don't think that will be necessary." But Ta's smile told Jack this mission was far from over. Back aboard the ISS Odyssey, Captain Jack Steele paced in his quarters, struggling to wrap his mind around Dr. Quark's revelations. The mission had taken a bizarre turn. Negotiating with the Orella tribe was one thing, but dealing with their culture's fixation on sensuality was something else entirely. Jack was a military man, not a diplomat, or a sex therapist, for that matter. He tapped his communicator and called for Riker to join him. The burly sergeant entered moments later, still grinning from their earlier encounter with the Orellans. "Cap, you need me?" "Yeah, I need you to focus. We've got a problem on our hands, and it's not just the obvious one," Jack said, rubbing his temples. According to Dr. Quark, the Orellans express their emotions and trust through physical intimacy. If we want their help in the war against the Chrono Empire, we need to appeal to their baser instincts. Riker raised an eyebrow. "So, what? You want me to keep getting cozy with the locals? I can handle that." Jack shot him a glare. "No, I don't want anyone getting too cozy. This is still a diplomatic mission, but we need to figure out how to build a relationship with these people without turning this into a frat party." Riker shrugged. "They're not exactly leaving us much choice, Cap. These Orellans are wired different. Maybe we just need to play along, show them we're not a threat." Jack sighed, pacing the room. "I know, but I don't want this mission to devolve into whatever that was back in the temple." He paused, thinking hard. "We need a plan. Something that respects their culture without us completely losing our heads." Just then, the ship's communicator chimed, and Dr. Quark's voice came through. "Captain, I have additional information you might find useful. It seems the Orellans use their physical rituals to connect on an emotional level, but they also place high value on intellectual and strategic prowess." Jack's eyes lit up. "Go on, Doc." "Their high priestess, Toa, is known to engage in mental and philosophical debates. If you can impress her with your wit, she may be more inclined to form a deeper connection, one that doesn't involve, well, you know." Jack turned to Riker with a smile. "Looks like we won't have to rely on just their physical customs after all. If we can show them we're smart and strategic, we might be able to win their favor without all the distractions." Riker chuckled. "Good luck with that, Cap. You saw how they were back there. But hey, I'm with you. If we got to debate some alien philosophy to avoid another strip show, count me in." Jack smirked. "Let's get down to business. I want you to gather the crew for a briefing. We're going to reapproach this mission with a clearer head. No more distractions." Riker nodded and left the room, his heavy boots echoing down the ship's corridor. Jack sat down at his desk, staring at the holographic map of the planet below. The Orellans might have been sensual and playful, but underneath their provocative customs, they were a proud and intelligent species. If he could appeal to their minds, perhaps they could form a powerful alliance against the Chrono Empire. A few hours later, Jack, Riker, and Dr. Quark beamed back down to the surface, this time accompanied by a small group of officers. The Orellans greeted them as before, by lifting their skirts and flashing their bright blue skin, but Jack was better prepared for it now. He kept his focus on Ta, who stood proudly in the center of the group, her violet eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Captain Steele, you've returned," Tala said with a knowing smile. "I trust you are ready for more cultural exchange." Jack straightened his uniform and met her gaze, determined to steer the conversation in a new direction. High Priestess Ta'a, I would like to speak with you about something more than just culture. We come seeking your wisdom and your strength. I've heard that you are not just a leader of rituals, but also a master of strategy. Ta'a tilted her head, clearly intrigued. You wish to challenge me in a contest of minds? Jack nodded. Yes. We are allies in a greater struggle, and I believe we can learn from one another, not just in body, but in mind. I propose a different kind of exchange today. The Orellan women exchanged curious glances, and Ta'a's smile grew. Very well, Captain Steele. Let us see if the humans are as sharp in wit as they are in other ways. Come, we will debate in the Hall of Knowledge. She led them through the village, past the vibrant huts and woven structures, to a large circular building adorned with glowing crystals. Inside, the air was cooler, the walls covered in intricate carvings depicting scenes of Orellan history. Cushions were arranged in a circle around a central fire pit, where Ta'a took her seat, motioning for Jack to sit across from her. This is our sacred space for intellectual pursuit, Ta'a explained, her voice low and melodic. Here, we exchange ideas, philosophies, and strategies. The mind is the most powerful weapon, Captain Steele. Show me yours. Jack felt the weight of the challenge but remained composed. He had faced tougher situations in battle, though none quite like this. He leaned forward, ready to prove that humans were more than just their physical presence. The debate began, ranging from tactical approaches in warfare to philosophical discussions on leadership and the balance between peace and conflict. Ta'a was sharp, her mind quick, her arguments compelling. Jack countered with his military knowledge, drawing on Earth's long history of strategic warfare and diplomacy. The other Orellan women listened intently, occasionally nodding in approval as the debate grew more intense. By the time they finished, the sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the village. Ta'a stood, her eyes filled with newfound respect for the human captain. You have impressed me, Jack Steele. The Orellans may be a peaceful people, but we are not without our own form of power. You have proven that your people are worthy of our alliance. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I'm honored, High Priestess. We're stronger together. Ta'a smiled again, but this time it was softer, more sincere. Yes, Captain, together we shall face the Chrono Empire. And perhaps one day you will see that there is much more to our culture than meets the eye. Jack stood and bowed slightly. I look forward to learning more, Ta'a. But for now, I think we've made a great first step. As the humans returned to their ship, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The mission was far from over, but they had finally established a real connection with the Orellans, one that went beyond their unusual customs. Now, they had the beginnings of a powerful alliance, and maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide in the war against the Chrono Empire. But Jack knew better than to get too comfortable. The galaxy had a way of throwing surprises at him, and this mission was just getting started. The mood aboard the ISS Odyssey had lightened considerably. After Captain Jack Steele's intellectual duel with High Priestess Ta'a, the humans and the Orellans had formed a tentative but promising alliance. Though the Orellan customs remained baffling to the crew, they had come to realize there was more to the alien race than provocative rituals. The Orellans were as intellectually sharp as they were physically expressive. Jack convened his officers in the ship's war room to discuss the next phase of their mission. The holographic map of the galaxy hovered over the table, highlighting the boundaries of the Chrono Empire's rapidly expanding territory. The threat they posed was growing by the day. We've made progress with the Orellans, Jack began, standing at the head of the table. But we need more than just a philosophical alliance. We need their military support if we're going to stand a chance against the Chrono Empire. Dr. Quark, seated next to the captain, adjusted his glasses. The Orellans may not have a traditional military, Captain, but their technology is highly advanced. I've been studying their energy manipulation systems. They have the ability to harness planetary resources on a massive scale. If we can convince them to weaponize that technology, it could give us the upper hand. Reka leaned forward, frowning. Are you saying we ask them to turn their peaceful tech into weapons? That might not go over so well with these folks, Cap. They don't exactly seem like the warring type. Jack nodded. I know. That's why we have to be careful. We're not asking them to abandon their principles, but the reality is, the Chrono Empire won't spare them if they continue to expand. We need to frame this as a fight for survival, not just for us, but for them too. Do you think they'll buy it? Riker asked, crossing his arms. They'll have to, Jack replied firmly, because if the Chrono Empire reaches their system, it won't matter how peaceful they are. Just then, the ship's communicator chimed. Captain Steele, you have a visitor requesting an audience. It's High Priestess Tar. She's arrived in her personal craft. Jack glanced at his officers. Looks like she's not wasting any time. Let's go meet her. They made their way to the docking bay, where Tar's sleek, silver vessel had just landed. The doors hissed open, and Tala stepped out, flanked by two of her advisors. Her regal presence was undeniable, though her smile was warm as she greeted Jack. Captain Steele, she said with a slight bow, I bring news. The Orellan Council has convened, and we have made a decision regarding your request for alliance. Jack's heart quickened. This was the moment they had been waiting for. I'm glad to hear it, High Priestess. Please, let's discuss it further in the briefing room. Tala nodded, and they walked together through the ship's corridors, her advisors trailing closely behind. The tension in the air was palpable. Would the Orellans commit to aiding humanity, or would they remain neutral in the face of the coming storm? Once inside the briefing room, they took their seats around the table. Toa remained standing, her gaze sweeping over the gathered humans before she began. The Orellan people are not warriors, Captain. We are builders, creators, and explorers of the mind and spirit. Violence is not in our nature. Her voice was calm, but there was a certain steel in her eyes. However, we are not blind to the dangers that the Chrono Empire poses. We have decided to offer our aid, but in our own way. Jack exchanged a quick glance with Riker and Dr. Quark before responding. And what does that look like exactly? Ta raised a hand, and a small holographic device on her wrist activated. A 3D image of the Orellan homeworld appeared in the center of the table, showing massive energy conduits running through the planet's surface. Our world is rich in resources, and we have long mastered the art of energy manipulation, she explained. We can enhance your ships, augment your weapons, and provide you with shielding technology that is far beyond anything the Chrono Empire possesses. However, she paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. We will not take up arms ourselves. You will have to fight your own battles. Jack leaned back, considering her offer. It wasn't ideal, but it was more than he had expected. The Orellans were giving them a powerful advantage without compromising their pacifist values. It was a delicate balance, but one he could work with. I understand, Jack said. We'll accept your aid, and in return, we will defend your people if the Chrono Empire comes for you. This is as much about protecting your way of life as it is about ours. Toa inclined her head. Agreed. There is one more matter we must address, though. Jack's brow furrowed. What's that? Toa's eyes darkened slightly. The Chrono Empire is not merely a military force. They have spies, infiltrators, and saboteurs in every corner of the galaxy. Even now, they may be watching us. Dr. Quark's eyes widened. Are you saying they've already infiltrated Orellan society? It is possible, Toa replied. We have detected unusual communications patterns in recent weeks, and some of our people have reported strange sightings. If the Chrono have agents here, they will stop at nothing to undermine our alliance. Jack cursed under his breath. So we're not just fighting them in open space. We have to deal with spies too. Precisely, Tara said, her voice low. That is why I've brought my most trusted advisors with me. We must root out any Chrono infiltrators before they can sabotage our plans. Riker, Ever the soldier cracked his knuckles. Looks like we've got ourselves a little cloak and dagger mission. I can handle that. Jack nodded grimly. This complicates things, but it's nothing we can't handle. We'll work together to flush out the Chronos spies before they get the chance to strike. Tala smiled slightly, though there was no humor in it. Good, because if they succeed, our alliance and our future will be in jeopardy. The weight of her words hung in the air as the meeting concluded. Jack knew that the war with the Chrono Empire was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. But now, with the Orellans at their side, both in mind and technology, he felt a renewed sense of hope. Yet the shadows of sabotage and espionage loomed large. The Chrono Empire wouldn't simply let their enemies gather strength unchallenged. They would strike from within, and it was up to Jack and his crew to uncover their plans before it was too late. As the meeting ended, Jack couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the Orellan people were hiding. Their sensuality, their intellect, and now their knowledge of the Chronos' covert tactics. It was clear that there was much more to the Orellans than met the eye. And if they were going to win this war, Jack would need to uncover every last one of those secrets. The atmosphere aboard the ISS Odyssey had shifted dramatically. The excitement of securing an alliance with the Orellans was now tempered by the threat of Chrono infiltrators lurking within their ranks. Captain Jack Steele sat in his quarters, staring at a data tablet filled with reports of suspicious activity across Orellan space. His mind raced with possibilities, but one question burned above all others. Who could they trust? A chime at the door broke his concentration. It was Lieutenant Riker. Jack motioned for him to enter. "Captain, we've got eyes on a potential lead," Riker said without preamble, his expression serious. Orellan officials have been tracking a series of encrypted communications coming from one of their orbital stations. They're not sure where it's being sent, but the encryption matches chrono patterns. Jack straightened, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders, and they're sure it's chrono. Riker nodded. As sure as they can be. The signal is masked, but it has the same signature we've seen in other chrono infiltrations. I spoke with Toa's advisors. They're ready to launch an investigation, but they're requesting we handle this quietly. They don't want to cause panic among their people. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. Of course not. The last thing we need is a mass panic that tips off the infiltrators. We'll need a small team to go in under the radar, assess the situation, and neutralize the threat. Riker's lips curled into a small predatory grin. I was hoping you'd say that, Cap. I've already got a team prepped and ready. We can leave as soon as you give the word. Jack nodded. Good, but make sure you coordinate with the Orellans. We don't want to step on any toes here, especially with Tola watching our every move. Understood, Riker said, his voice brimming with confidence. We'll handle it discreetly. Before Riker could leave, Jack's communicator beeped, flashing with an urgent message from High Priestess Toa herself. Jack raised an eyebrow and quickly accepted the call. The holographic image of Tola flickered to life before them. Her usual serene expression was replaced with a look of concern. Captain Steele, I fear we may be running out of time, she began, her voice low and strained. Our operatives have intercepted another signal, a distress call of sorts. It appears to be coming from deep within one of our most sacred temples on Orellan Prime. Jack exchanged a glance with Riker. A distress call from a temple? What's happening down there? Toa's image flickered, her eyes narrowing. We do not know, but the temple in question is one of our most ancient. It is a place of meditation, isolated from the rest of society. Only a select few are permitted inside. If the Chrono have infiltrated it, then they may have access to our most closely guarded secrets. A chill ran down Jack's spine. The Chrono's espionage efforts were more far-reaching than he had imagined. Not only had they penetrated Orellan society, but they might have gained access to the heart of their spiritual culture. All right, Jack said, making his decision. We'll send a team down to the temple. but we'll need someone familiar with the site, someone who can help us navigate without drawing attention. Tala hesitated for a moment before speaking. There is one who knows the temple better than anyone. Her name is Nara. She is a guardian of the temple, a position that holds great importance among our people. She has agreed to assist you. Thank you, High Priestess, Jack replied. We'll take every precaution. We won't let the Chrono get their hands on your secrets. I trust you, Captain, Tala said, her voice softening. But be careful. The temple is not just a physical place. It holds power that even we do not fully understand. If the Chrono have tampered with it, the consequences could be far-reaching. With that, her image disappeared, leaving Jack and Riker alone once more. You heard her, Jack said, standing. Get the team ready. We're heading to Orellan Prime. The descent to Orellan Prime was swift and silent. Jack, Riker, and a small tactical team from the Odyssey were accompanied by Nera, the Orellan Temple Guardian. She was a striking figure, tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and a quiet intensity in her violet eyes. Dressed in simple white robes, she seemed almost ethereal, her movements fluid and precise. As they approached the temple, nestled high in the mountains of Orellan Prime, Jack couldn't help but admire the structure's architectural beauty. The temple was carved directly into the mountainside, its grand arches and spires glowing softly in the planet's twilight. It was both ancient and alien, a reminder of just how different the Orellans were from humanity. This place has stood for millennia, Nera said quietly as they walked through the temple's grand entrance. It is a place of deep reflection where we connect with the very essence of the universe. Riker grunted, clearly unimpressed by the spiritual significance. And now it's possibly been turned into a Chrono hideout. Just our luck. Nara cast him a sidelong glance but said nothing. She led them deeper into the temple, through a series of winding corridors lit by soft, pulsating lights embedded in the stone walls. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Jack could feel the weight of the temple's history pressing down on them, a palpable energy that seemed to vibrate in the air. Finally, they reached a large circular chamber. In the center stood a massive stone altar, surrounded by intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. Nora stopped just short of the altar, her expression darkening. This is the heart of the temple, she whispered. It is here that we meditate and seek communion with the stars. Jack's attention was drawn to the far side of the chamber, where a set of strange markings had been carved into the wall. They were crude and jagged, completely out of place in the otherwise pristine temple. What is that? Jack asked, pointing to the markings. Nara's face paled. Those are not of Orellan origin. Riker stepped forward, scanning the area with his handheld device. Cap, I'm picking up traces of energy, chrono energy. Before they could react, a low hum began to fill the chamber. The carvings on the walls pulsed brighter, and the air around them grew thick with a strange, electric charge. Everyone, get back, Jack ordered, but it was too late. A sudden burst of light erupted from the altar, enveloping them all in a blinding flash. Jack felt himself being lifted off his feet, his body suspended in midair as the temple's energy surged through him. He could hear voices, alien, disembodied voices whispering in the air around him. The words were indecipherable, but their intent was clear. The Chrono had activated something within the temple, something ancient, something powerful. And now it was awakening. When the light finally subsided, Jack found himself lying on the cold stone floor, his head spinning. He struggled to his feet, glancing around the chamber. Riker and the rest of the team were still recovering, but Nera was already on her feet, her eyes wide with horror. The temple, it's been corrupted, she whispered, her voice trembling. The Chrono have awoken the forbidden power. Jack's blood ran cold. He had no idea what the forbidden power was, but he knew one thing for certain. They had just unleashed something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. and the chrono were behind it all. The tension in the air was palpable as Jack Steele's team gathered their bearings in the temple chamber. The chrono's tampering had set off something dangerous, and now the mysterious forbidden power was awake. Jack tried to steady himself, but the dizziness from the temple's sudden surge of energy lingered in his body. "Nora," he called out, his voice hoarse, "what exactly is this forbidden power?" Naira's eyes remained fixed on the altar, her expression one of profound fear. "The forbidden power is a force older than our civilization, a remnant from before we understood the universe. It's said to be the raw energy of the stars, but our ancestors locked it away, believing that no mortal should wield such control. If the chrono have activated it..." Jack's mind raced. If the chrono had indeed tapped into this ancient power, they weren't just a threat to the Orellans anymore. They were a threat to the entire galaxy. Riker, still shaken from the energy blast, staggered over to Jack, his eyes filled with concern. "Cap, we've got to shut this thing down before it spirals out of control. Whatever the chrono are up to, it can't be good." Before Jack could respond, a series of high-pitched tones echoed through the chamber. Riker's device buzzed in his hand, and his face darkened as he read the data. "I'm picking up multiple life signatures," Riker said, his voice tense. "They're not Orellan, it's the chrono. They're coming this way." Jack's instincts kicked in. "Everyone, take defensive positions. We don't know how many of them there are, but we can't let them reach this altar." His team snapped into action, fanning out across the chamber, weapons drawn and eyes sharp. Nora stood by the altar, her face pale but determined. "You must stop them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If they succeed in fully awakening the forbidden power, it will consume everything." Jack nodded grimly. "We'll hold the line." Suddenly, the entrance to the chamber exploded in a shower of debris. The team flinched as figures emerged from the dust cloud. Chrono soldiers, clad in their sleek, dark armor, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They moved with terrifying precision, weapons raised, and Jack knew instantly that these weren't just ordinary foot soldiers. These were elite chrono operatives. "Open fire," Jack shouted. The chamber erupted into chaos as Jack's team unloaded a hail of energy blasts toward the advancing chrono. The enemy soldiers dodged and weaved through the barrage, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Sparks flew, and the walls of the sacred temple echoed with the sounds of battle. Riker took position near a pillar, providing cover fire. "There's too many of them," he shouted over the din. "We can't hold them off for long." Jack gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, and the chrono were pushing forward with relentless force. His thoughts started to the altar, and then to Nora. If the chrono reached the altar and fully activated the forbidden power, it wouldn't matter if they survived this battle. Everything could be lost. "Nora," Jack called out, his voice barely audible over the gunfire. "Is there any way to shut this thing down?" Naira's eyes widened. "The only way to deactivate the power is to sever its connection to the stars. There's a control node deeper in the temple, but it's heavily guarded. No one has accessed it in centuries." Jack cursed under his breath. "Of course, it wouldn't be easy. We don't have much time. Lead the way. Riker, hold the line here as long as you can. I'll go with Nora." Riker gave a curt nod. "We'll buy you time. Just make sure you stop this thing, Cap." Without another word, Jack followed Nora through a hidden passage behind the altar. The corridor was narrow and dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the temple's ancient lights. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. Every second felt like an eternity. They emerged into a massive underground chamber, even larger than the one they had left behind. At its center stood a towering crystalline structure, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. It hummed with energy, and Jack could feel the raw power radiating from it, like the heartbeat of a star. "This is it," Nora said, her voice barely a whisper. "The control node. If we disrupt the energy flow, the forbidden power will go dormant again." Jack eyed the node, his mind working rapidly. How do we shut it down? Nara stepped toward the structure, her fingers brushing the surface of the crystal. There are mechanisms inside, but they are ancient and delicate. We must be precise, or the whole temple could collapse around us. Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Then let's get to work. As Nira began to manipulate the mechanisms within the node, Jack stood guard, his eyes scanning the chamber for any sign of chrono interference. The sound of distant gunfire echoed through the temple, a constant reminder that time was running out. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. Jack's heart raced. What was that? Naira's hands froze over the controls, her eyes wide with fear. It's too late. The energy flow has already been disrupted. The temple is destabilizing. Jack cursed under his breath. We've got to stop it before the whole place goes up in flames. Naira's fingers moved faster, her hands a blur as she worked to correct the imbalance. But the rumbling grew louder, and the crystalline structure began to pulse erratically, its soft glow becoming a violent strobe of light. We don't have much time. Nira shouted, her voice strained with urgency. Jack turned to the crystal, his mind racing. If they couldn't shut down the node in time, the energy within the temple would explode outward, devastating everything around them. The thought of the chrono using such a force chilled him to the bone. Suddenly, Nira cried out, I've done it. The power is receding. The crystal's wild pulsing slowed, and the chaotic hum of energy in the chamber began to fade. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. But before they could relax, the door to the chamber burst open, and a squad of chrono operatives stormed inside, their weapons trained on Jack and Nira. Jack raised his weapon, but he knew they were out of options. There were too many of them, and the temple's energy had been drained, leaving them vulnerable. One of the chrono soldiers stepped forward, his voice a cold hiss. You may have delayed our plans, Captain, but this is only the beginning. The forbidden power is ours to control, and soon the galaxy will tremble. Jack's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on his weapon. He wasn't about to let the chrono get away with their plans, not while he still had breath in his body. We'll see about that, Jack growled. And with that, the final confrontation was set to begin. The chrono soldiers surrounded Jack and Nira, their dark armor glistening under the faint light of the control node. Jack's eyes darted between them, assessing the situation. They were heavily armed and well prepared, and the odds were against them. But Jack had faced worse odds before. He wasn't ready to give up. Not now, not ever. The lead chrono operative, a tall figure with glowing crimson eyes, stepped forward. His voice echoed through the chamber like a death knell. You humans are predictable, always trying to interfere with powers far beyond your grasp. You've delayed the inevitable, but you won't stop it. Jack stood tall, keeping his weapon trained on the chrono leader. I don't care how powerful you think you are, he said coldly. You're not walking out of here with the forbidden power. The chrono leader chuckled, a low, menacing sound. Brave words, Captain Steele, but bravery alone won't save you. In a sudden blur of motion, the chrono soldiers lunged forward. Jack fired his weapon, taking down two of them with precise shots, but the rest swarmed in, closing the distance. Jack moved swiftly, dodging their attacks and returning fire, but he knew he couldn't hold them off forever. Nora, standing by the control node, watched in horror as the battle unfolded. Her hands trembled as she tried to reactivate the temple's defense systems, but the ancient mechanisms were slow to respond. She felt helpless, watching Jack fight against overwhelming odds. Suddenly, one of the chrono soldiers rushed toward her, raising his weapon. Jack saw the movement out of the corner of his eye and acted on instinct. He charged at the soldier, knocking him to the ground before he could reach Nora. Nora, Jack shouted, his voice strained with effort. Get out of here. I'll hold them off. Nora shook her head, her voice desperate. I won't leave you behind. Jack fired another shot, taking down another Chronos soldier. You have to. If the forbidden power gets into their hands, everything we fought for will be lost. Nara hesitated for a moment, her heart torn, but she knew Jack was right. The fate of the galaxy was at stake, and she couldn't let the Chronos succeed. With a heavy heart, Nara turned and sprinted toward the back of the chamber, disappearing into the shadows. Jack watched her go, knowing this was likely the last time he would see her. But he had no time for regret. He had a job to do. The Chrono leader sneered, watching Nara flee. So, you send your ally to safety while you face certain death. Admirable, but foolish. Jack glared at him, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. You don't know humans as well as you think. The Chrono leader raised his weapon, and for a moment, Jack thought it was over. But then, a deafening roar filled the chamber, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. The ground shook, and the Chrono soldiers turned in confusion. Out of the shadows emerged a massive figure, towering over the Chrono operatives. It was Riker, his body armor scorched and his face covered in dirt, but his eyes burned with determination. You didn't think I'd let you have all the fun, did you, Cap? Riker grinned, raising his weapon and unleashing a barrage of fire on the Chrono soldiers. The Chrono were caught off guard, and Riker's assault sent them scrambling for cover. Jack used the distraction to his advantage, diving behind a pillar and taking out 2 more soldiers with well-placed shots. The Chrono leader snarled, his plans unraveling before his eyes. Enough of this. We will not be defeated by primitive humans. He reached for a device on his arm, activating it with a sharp tap. Instantly, the air around the control node began to shimmer, and the crystal pulsed with an ominous light. The temperature in the room dropped, and a low hum filled the chamber. Riker frowned, firing at the Chrono leader but missing. Cap, what's he doing? Jack's heart sank. He's triggering the forbidden power. The crystal's glow intensified, and arcs of energy began to shoot from its surface, striking the walls of the chamber and sending debris flying. The Chrono soldiers retreated, their leader standing resolute by the control node, his eyes gleaming with triumph. The power of the stars will be ours, the Chrono leader shouted, his voice filled with twisted glee. And you will be nothing more than dust in the wind. Jack gritted his teeth, trying to think of a way out of this. The energy from the crystal was growing stronger by the second, and soon it would be too late to stop it. We've got to shut it down, Jack muttered, more to himself than to Riker. But how? Suddenly, a voice crackled through Jack's communicator. It was Nara. Jack, there's one more thing you can do. The temple has a failsafe, a self-destruct mechanism that can collapse the entire structure and seal the forbidden power forever. Jack's heart skipped a beat. A self-destruct? You didn't mention that before. I didn't think it would come to this, Nara replied, her voice thick with regret. But it's the only way to ensure the Chrono don't get their hands on the power. You'll have to trigger it from the main console near the altar. Jack glanced at Riker, who had overheard the conversation. You heard her, Cap. We fought to blow this place to Kingdom Come. Jack nodded grimly. Right. They moved quickly, weaving through the chaos of the chamber as the crystal's energy surged around them. Chrono soldiers continued to fire at them, but Riker's covering shots kept them at bay long enough for Jack to reach the console. The altar was bathed in the eerie glow of the crystal, and the ancient controls blinked to life as Jack approached. His fingers flew over the buttons, deciphering the ancient Aurelian language with Nara's guidance. Hurry, Jack, Nara urged, the powers reaching critical levels. With a final tap, Jack activated the self-destruct sequence. A loud alarm blared through the temple, and the walls began to shake violently. The ground beneath them cracked, and pieces of the ceiling started to fall. The Chrono leader, realizing what was happening, roared in fury. You fools, you'll destroy us all. Jack looked him in the eye, a steely resolve in his voice. Better that than letting you take the galaxy down with you. The chamber quaked as the self-destruct countdown ticked down. Jack and Rika sprinted toward the exit, dodging falling debris and energy blasts from the now desperate Chronos soldiers. "Time to get out of here," Rika yelled, his voice barely audible over the deafening roar of the collapsing temple. As they reached the entrance, the entire structure shuddered, and Jack knew they had only seconds left before the temple was reduced to rubble. They had made out alive, but the real battle had only just begun. The temple behind Jack and Rika collapsed in a deafening roar, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Dust and debris filled the air, but the ominous glow of the forbidden power had finally dimmed, extinguished by the temple's destruction. They had succeeded for now. Jack caught his breath, his chest heaving as he scanned the landscape. The dense jungle stretched out before them, silent and still, as if the temple's death throes had swallowed the very life from the planet. But Jack knew better. The Chrono weren't finished, and neither was the war for the forbidden power. "Cap," Rika muttered, wiping sweat and dirt from his brow. "That was close. But I don't think we've seen the last of those Chrono bastards." Jack nodded, his gaze narrowing. He could still feel the weight of what they had done. They delayed the Chrono, but they hadn't stopped them. Not yet. Suddenly, Jack's communicator buzzed, and Nora's voice came through, filled with urgency. "Jack, are you there? Did you make it out?" "We're alive," Jack responded, his voice steady despite the chaos they had just survived. "The temple's gone, and the forbidden power with it, for now." Nora's sigh of relief was palpable even through the static. "That's good news, but I've been monitoring Chrono transmissions. They sent reinforcements. They know what you've done, and they're coming for you." Rika groaned. "Of course they are. Can't they give us a break?" But Jack's mind was already racing. "How many?" "Too many to fight head-on," Nora replied grimly. "Your only chance is to make it to the extraction point I sent to your datapad. There's a small resistance outpost nearby. If you can get there, they'll help you get off this planet." Jack pulled up the coordinates on his pad, his eyes narrowing as he calculated the distance. "We've got a long hike ahead of us." Rika grinned despite the dire situation. "Just like old times, eh, Cap?" Jack smirked. "Let's move." They plunged into the jungle, the dense foliage swallowing them up as they moved with purpose. Every step felt heavier as exhaustion gnawed at Jack's muscles, but the stakes were too high to slow down. The jungle was eerily silent except for the occasional rustling of leaves underfoot, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, the tension only grew. Jack's mind was on the Chrono. How far behind were they? How long before they caught up? He knew they had to stay ahead of the game, but without knowing the enemy's exact position, it felt like they were walking into a trap. Suddenly, Rika held up his hand, signaling Jack to stop. "Cap, you hear that?" Jack strained his ears, and then he heard it, a faint hum, barely discernible over the sounds of the jungle. It wasn't natural, it was mechanical. "Drones," Jack whispered. "Chrono scouts." "They're closing in," Rika muttered. "We've got to move faster." But just as they started to pick up the pace, a bright light shot through the trees, followed by the sharp whirring sound of a drone. It zipped through the air, circling overhead like a predator stalking its prey. "Damn it," Jack hissed. "They found us." The drone's sensors locked onto them, and Jack knew it was only a matter of time before the rest of the Chrono forces arrived. "We've got to take it down, or they'll be on us in minutes." Rika nodded, already pulling out his rifle. With a quick, precise shot, he took aim and fired. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks, crashing to the ground in a twisted heap of metal. "Nice shot," Jack said, but there was no time to celebrate. "Move." They sprinted through the jungle, their breath coming in ragged gasps as they pushed themselves to the limit. Jack could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of their mission bearing down on them. The Chrono were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. After what felt like hours, they finally broke through the thick jungle canopy and emerged into a clearing. Jack's eyes immediately went to the horizon. There, on the other side of the valley, he spotted the resistance outpost, a small fortified structure nestled against the cliffs. "We're close," Jack said, his voice tight with urgency. "We've just got to make it across the valley." But before they could move, a loud rumbling echoed through the air. Jack turned, his stomach sinking as he saw them, chrono dropships, dark and ominous, descending from the sky. "They're here," Riker growled. The dropships hovered overhead, releasing a swarm of chrono soldiers who spread out like a dark wave, their weapons at the ready. Jack and Riker were outnumbered and outgunned, but Jack wasn't about to give up. "We're not going down without a fight," Jack said, raising his rifle. "Riker, cover me. We need to get to that outpost." Riker nodded, his face set in grim determination. "You got it, Cap." They moved in unison, firing at the advancing Chronos soldiers as they made their way across the valley. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, each step bringing them closer to their goal, but the enemy was closing in fast. Explosions erupted around them as the Chrono fired relentlessly, but Jack and Riker pressed on. The outpost was their only hope. If they could just reach it, they might have a chance. Just when it seemed like they wouldn't make it, the ground beneath them shook, and the sound of gunfire rang out from the cliffs. Jack looked up to see the resistance fighters, their weapons blazing as they provided cover fire. "They're giving us an opening," Riker shouted. "Let's go." With renewed determination, they sprinted toward the outpost, ducking and weaving through the hail of bullets. The resistance fighters held the line, keeping the Chrono at bay long enough for Jack and Riker to reach the safety of the fortified walls. As they collapsed against the outpost's gate, gasping for breath, a resistance soldier rushed to greet them. "Captain Steele, we've been expecting you. We need to get you out of here now." Jack nodded, still catching his breath. "What about the Chrono?" "They won't stop," the soldier said grimly. "But we have a ship ready to get you off planet. It's your only chance." Jack glanced at Riker, who gave him a nod. "Let's finish this." With the resistance fighters holding off the Chrono, Jack and Riker followed the soldier to a hidden landing pad where a sleek starship waited for them. The roar of its engines was a welcome sound as they boarded, and within moments, they were in the air, leaving the jungle and the Chrono behind. As the ship ascended into the sky, Jack leaned back in his seat, exhaustion finally overtaking him. The forbidden power was safe for now, but deep down, Jack knew this wasn't the end. The Chrono wouldn't stop hunting them, and the galaxy's fight for survival had only just begun. But Jack Steele was ready. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on, because that's what humans did. They fought, they survived, and they won.